Well, hello, and welcome to the new home. So, what I was given for the message for today, and I apologize for how long it's taken. We moved, so, you know, it that got in the way of some things. What I was given, though, for this message was to talk about concept. And a lot of the messages moving forward through this series will be like this, I think. I suspect. And when we talk about the offices, even though it's recognized that this is just a small portion of somebody's personality, there are nevertheless still characteristics that crop up and become a part of their id, as it were. So, for example, most most shepherds or pastors, they have a tendency to, it's part of their character innately that they would desire to help other people in some way or another. They want to not help. Help is too general. Specifically, they want to take care of something or someone. They're caretakers, which is actually what the next message will be. I, if I remember correctly. I'll have to sit down and pray for a minute before I do that. But today, for this one is about heroism, as it were. See, everybody has this innate drive. Every office has a certain drive to go do something. They want to save the day in their own kind of way. But it's not the same kind of drive. Like somebody who's a teacher by office. They might want to save somebody in a way, but their mindset is, I'm going to save them by creating a structure and an order for them. It's oftentimes methodical. Oftentimes. I've known teachers who will rush out there, but it is that same way. They don't show up in their a knight in shining armor. It's more like a doctor, if you will. They're going to try to assess the situation, understand things, clarify, and then move in accordance with what they can perceive. Shepherds want to save the day in their own way by taking care of people in the way that they take care of them. No, I'm talking about a much more gallant and almost rash methodology, where they will ride in like that knight in shining armor. They'll effectively white knight everything and everyone because they want to protect, they want to take care, they want to save the day. And there's no long-term plan in a lot of cases. It's very much so this person needs help. I'm going to go help them right now. Why are we talking about this? We're going to go do this. See, and understand something very clearly before I specify. The reason why I start off talking about how there are different, every office has their own kind of aspect of this, but it's not as pronounced. But there's also the side of it that with every single office, anybody can learn to be this way. Even when we did the time of praying together about the different offices, and You should be careful. There's a mirror right next to me.
Dang it, I didn't think of that.
It's fine. My shoulder was in the way, but still, next time I'm moving it. Anyway, apparently we don't need to be at Edgefield for those kinds of things to happen. Damn. What was I saying? And now you guys get the awkward pause as I try to remember what I was saying, which, yay. Just like the messages at Edgefield. Right. I was talking about the way that a lot of us, even like during that time when we were all praying together about our different offices, some of us had certain giftings that could actually like kind of interfere with us functioning in our office. And interfere isn't the right word, but it kind of is. I'll use myself as the example in that, my office was apostle, but I also had this like very strong shepherd's gifting, potentially additional office type of situation going on where there was very much so this drive and ability to take care of people, and how I'll manifest both of those qualities to some extent. And that happens. Like I talked about during the Office series, this isn't like a science per se. God bestows a portion of himself to each of us, and we represent through these offices a portion of his character. And it's kind of like his fingerprint on our DNA, if you will, on our character, on our person, that kind of intrinsic aspect of God that comes from the fact that every single one of us carries his breath. However you paint it, whether you believe that the story of Adam and Eve is poetry or something else, there's a point in there where we have to recognize that every single one of us was created by God, and as such, life came into us when God breathed it into us. So it is his breath that is in our lungs and has given us life. And as a result of that, all of us are touched by God. And all of us have some attribute of him that we carry forward. And these 5 offices are very much so a kind of metric of that. And, it's not as inflexible as, Aaron's a shepherd, which means there's no opportunity for him to at all to learn to be more like any of these other things, or to be taught to be more like one of these other things. I mean, during one of the messages, I remember talking about how I know this apostle. God told me he was an apostle, and I just sat there. I'm like, oh, okay. I did not see that. He thinks he's a prophet. He acts like an evangelist, but apparently he's an apostle. And that happens because we are very much so creatures where nature and nurture both are valid aspects of our development. So if my natural element is if I'm naturally, my office is an apostle, and then I'm raised by evangelists and taught how to be an evangelist and all this other stuff, and my life is spent being honed as an evangelist, I'm going to act like an evangelist to some extent. I'm always going to have that kind of like intrinsic quality that comes with why I do things being very different. I'm still going to value community as a whole over just simply gathering people and drawing them in. So there's always going to be this kind of internal conflict there. But I will still nonetheless act like I've been taught to act. So this is a thing that happens. Like I said, it's not inflexible here. And in truth, like even from the Office series when we talked about that, and even just last week talking about the house that we build, there's a place for every one of these offices to learn from the other offices and to grow from them. And a lot of this series, I've been given these kind of shared attributes, even though the heart is very different behind them. They still kind of illustrate a certain character trait, a certain methodology, and that certain offices pursue more than others. And now, all that said, what I was given for this week is the kind of concept of heroism that you find in evangelists and apostles more than any other offices. See, no one else, if you hop online and you go to chat forums or, whatever, most likely when you see somebody pulling a white knight, you're probably looking at an evangelist or an apostle. It's a pretty regular thing. And see, the reason being is that even though they come from two different sides of things, so, apostles, people who hold that office of apostle, their heart and mind and soul, like their direction is very focused on the community, on the pack, if you will. They're not interested in, it's not a simple thing, it's not a small thing. If they save you, they see a world of people that need help, that need salvation. And their mentality is, okay, I'm gonna take this person, I'm gonna bring them in, I'm gonna help them find a place within the environment that I'm working to create. And it's not conscious like that, okay? Like, it really is just this subconscious, innate thing of, oh, this person needs to be saved. I've got them now. You're with me now. Hey, I'm gonna surround you with my friends. They're gonna become your friends. I'm gonna be here for you and walk through this with you and take care of you. And we're gonna press forward. And I'm gonna help you become invested in this group. And we're gonna be together. All of us are going to be together, and we're going to have our little crew, and we're going to get through all these problems. And I'm going to, and then on top of that, the apostle will very much so be the glue that binds the whole community. Oftentimes you'll find this where you've got that one person in the group who kind of sits in the center and everyone else is attached to them. And evangelists have the capacity to do this too, it's different, okay? With apostles, they're very ride or die. Evangelists are not. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So, with an apostle, it's this concept of, that's their methodology, but for them it's just, I'm going to save this person. And that's as far as they think about it. All that other stuff comes because it's intrinsic to their nature. And they might not even be aware of what they're doing. Like, most of them aren't. Like I talked about with the Office series originally, apostles are they're not the most misunderstood, they're the most poorly known. Because most people in the church don't even believe that there are apostles anymore. And then the ones that do believe that they're apostles don't recognize it as an office thing. It's not a concept. They treat it like a gifting. Everybody's an evangelist and a prophet and they're a shepherd, and they all have to do these things. And, they're right, kind of. But not everybody's built to be all those things. And there are tons of people who proclaim themselves as apostles, justified by the idea that they're sent ones from Jesus, and they don't really have that drive, they don't really have that desire. They cannot build a church because they don't have the tools for it. Their nature is something opposed to that. They're good at building something. Going back to the whole house analogy, they might be able to build the walls because they're a teacher, but that doesn't make it livable, So they'll try to build that church, and it's got shelter, but it doesn't have running water or heat. It doesn't have a foundation. It's very, very flimsy. It's just walls, man. But the point is that, like, for this concept and what we're talking about, this is the kind of approach that a lot of apostles will have, is they see a need, they see damage, they see somebody in pain, and they can't help themselves. They have to help, they have to save, and they have to fight. It's innate. One thing that was weird. Anyway, the other thing too is then you've got the evangelists, who very much so will also be those white knights and saviors. Like, they're going to save the day. They can't help themselves. They see a need. They see somebody who's in pain. They see somebody who needs something. And oftentimes evangelists can be some of the most generous, outgoing people that you'll find, because in what they see, and again, like, this is all innate stuff. Like, none of it's like thought out. It's just very emotive. They see somebody who is in need or in pain, and they say, I'm going to save that person. And they'll run out there and they will save the day. They'll show up at 3 o'clock in the morning to give that drunk person a ride home. And then the whole time they'll be like preaching at them. They'll be the one to like be there and take care of that person to an extent. The truth is like, evangelists don't have the kind of, generally evangelists do not have the same kind of ride or die kind of mentality. Like, as long as you are unsafe, they will fight and strive and be there with you day and night, and every moment of every second. They will call you, keep you accountable, they will message you, they will be there. And then when you're safe, you're okay. They don't need to deal with you anymore. So they might actually just like dip. They start kind of pulling away towards people that need them. And that's not a bad thing. That's how they're built. Everybody needs a first responder just as much as they need a primary care provider, It's just not everybody can be both. So for evangelists, like, they see that need and they see that person who needs to be saved, and they're going to go out and they're going to try to save them. And they're going to work at that and fight for that, and they're going to do everything they can in order to bring that person in. And a lot of times when we're looking at it from the context of the church, that's what they do, is they'll be there, they'll fight and strive and push and do everything they can to bring people into church. And then once they're there, once they're comfortable, once they're committed, once that evangelist has whatever they need to know, then they move on to the next person. Because innately they're gatherers. But in both cases, you see, there's this thing where they have this innate need to go out and just save the day. And even though the methodology might be very different, what the reasons might be very different, but not all that different. It's one of those types of deals where they're both just committed to reaching out, to going out, and they're gonna ride in there and they're gonna save that person in distress. Whether it's the person on drugs or struggling with alcohol, they're evangelists. And mind you, like, evangelists are typically far more outgoing than apostles in this regard. A lot of apostles tend to be more bitter. And that's the result of a lot of things, honestly. Just from their experiences. And also there's the aspect of it. So a lot of apostles have a bad history where bitterness is a part of their life. But also, there is this other side of it that's not necessarily influenced by the nurture that they've gone through. But there is another aspect of it, that they're very much so guardians of their community. See, evangelists don't think about the community. What they think about is the person in front of them. Whereas apostles, it's more divided. So they see the person in need, and they also think about, okay, if I'm going to bring that person in, are they going to be able to be okay with everybody else? And a lot of times what they land on is, well, I'll make it work. But this is a key thing for both of these offices, is this innate need to go out and save the day. And now, and it's easy to like critique. We can easily sit back, and a lot of people do. Like, I bring up the whole white knight thing because it's kind of an insult, I guess, online. You'll hear people, I've heard people plenty of times cough, you know who you are, cough, almost mock people for being white knights. And the thing of it is that, like, it's part of their nature. They can't help themselves. And there are lots of people, like, the original concept of that comes from the idea that they're all just a bunch of fakes, and they show up to save a woman who's being, like, called out because maybe, and they're only doing it because they like that woman or something like that. Like, that's fine, and that happens, but that's not everybody. That's definitely not everybody. There are a lot of people where what they do is they see somebody in need, and that's what they're responding to. It doesn't matter, the person could be wrong, but they don't know that. All that they know is that they see somebody being, like, verbally harassed online, or, being harassed online or criticized or something like that, and they're like, well, that's not fair. Well, what'd they do to deserve that? How dare you? And they ride in and, try to defend them. And that's because that's what they're seeing. And this isn't something that needs to be, like, this isn't something that people should feel bad about, In fact, it's actually very important for us as Christians and the church in general. This whole concept of riding out to save the day is intrinsic to our nature, to our survival, and more than that, to our ability to develop and grow the church. Like I said, it's easy to criticize an evangelist, for example, for the fact that they don't have that stick-to-itness that a person might want. But that's not really what they're built for. And yet at the same time, there's a place for evangelists to learn to deepen their relationships and learn how to have deeper relationships. It's just that their office is not one that's built on, spending all their time with one person. They're meant to go out and to, like, just bounce between people and, bring them in. That's how they work. And there's a beauty in that to recognize, because that person is going to, if you take that evangelist, we'll break it down, to that apostle, even though they both have that let's save the day mentality, I guarantee you that evangelist is going to reach a lot more people than that apostle is. That apostle will impact them more. They'll collect those people, and they'll impact them more deeply and even help them build a community and develop something where they can be safe. But that evangelist will reach far more people. And if that evangelist has some place to take those people, and those people are able to, like, be planted in there, it's the same deal, and there'll be a lot more of them. It's just that evangelist will not be the one to sow and nurture the seeds of that those people's development. And that's just this reality of, like, how they work. They're not made for this other stuff. And that's fine, because we have 4 other offices full of people who are made for the other stuff. We don't need everybody to be able to do every job. And that's an important thing for us to remember, especially when we're, like, the shepherd and you've got this evangelist bringing broken people into the church, and you're just like, why don't you stay and fix them with me? Well, yeah, the evangelist can easily like sit there and be there with you for a minute, but they're not designed for that. You know, their intrinsic value is that they're gathering the people. Yours is the caretaker. And even though that might feel overwhelming at times, it's what you're built for. And if you're honest with yourself, you're not really that overwhelmed by it. It might be tedious, but that's part of the work of doing that. Being a caretaker is having the patience to constantly be taking care of things. But I digress. That's for another message. The point is that with both of these offices, it's a very important thing for each of them in order to go out and do this. One, to perform this activity, and also to be recognized for what they're doing. And I don't mean like lauding adulation or anything like that. What I mean is that when I say recognized, is be understood for what they are doing and why. You know, the evangelist who's going out and gathering people and getting them involved and so on, and helping them find, and you know, they don't help them find a niche so much, but they definitely like bring them in and provide the opportunity. And that's where apostles are great for, because they help them find a niche. They help them find a place in the community. I mean, when you get the two of them teamed up, that can be fantastic. I mean, you get an evangelist and an apostle together, working together very well, and you can build a church very quickly. How deep that church goes and how long it lasts is dependent entirely on the body of it and the rest of the leadership. And to be realistic, most churches don't have more than like 2 leaders. Usually they only have 1. But, you know, for the sake of our message, and even what I'm just being given to talk about, you know, when those two are teamed up, that's a powerful team where it comes in terms of bringing people into the church and even creating a church, creating a body, as it were. Maybe church isn't quite the right term. And see, the thing of it is it's also something for those two to be aided by the rest of the body in this. You know, if you've got a leadership team and, you know, you can recognize that you have your apostle and your evangelist and they're out there trying to save the day, you know, they need just as much support as anybody else, because the truth of those trials, number one, when you're both of those offices are easily the most confrontational offices out of all of these. And that's not a thing. I mean, realistically, I know I've known some teachers that are really confrontational. I've known some shepherds. I've never actually met a shepherd that's legitimately confrontational. Like, a lot of them are passive-aggressive at most. The vast majority that I've known, met, and spoken to, what they will do is they'll quietly, like, hate you for what you did wrong to them that they never talked to you about. And prophets go back and forth. A lot of prophets run from conflict. Some prophets will run towards conflict and then run away if it gets hard. And then there are some who will just, like, they're going to stay and they're going to fight this out because you need to know the truth. But the reality is, when we talk about apostles and evangelists, it's innate to their character. It's innate for their office. They are confrontational. They're the most confrontational. And they have to be. Because evangelists are out there, like, in the thick of things, involving themselves with people who don't necessarily give a damn about God. They don't care. the evangelists are trying to make them care. And, you can say whatever you want about that, but that's what they do. And they're good at it, usually. I mean, yeah, you'll have a few who get caught up in those, like, really cheesy things of doctrine, of what works, and so on. Like we talked about when we talked about evangelists, they have the biggest propensity to have the most fluid relationship with the truth. And that can be really problematic at times. And that's something to be worked through, obviously. But when they do, and they're dealing with, oh man, when you have an evangelist who's literally just like following the Holy Spirit, and just going where God wants him to go, and talking to people who God wants him to talk to, and just going with the flow of God, they're powerful. I can think of a friend of mine who is an evangelist by office and heart and everything else. And he's got this massive network of just thousands and thousands of people who he knows and meets and, touches on a regular basis. And figuratively and literally, he's always like praying for people. And like he'll go out and do street ministry and come back, and suddenly his church has grown by like 3 or 4 people at the very least. Because he just goes where God tells him to go and just does what God tells him to do. And it's crazy. And that's the thing and with apostles, when you find like good apostles, you find solid churches, solid groups, where people are very much so finding a place in that culture, in that society. A lot of evangelists, when they are left, like to their own devices, they'll come up with a culture and so on, but oftentimes it's very very facile. It's very surface level, because that's oftentimes how evangelists are. It's a pitfall for them to fall into being, very surfacey. Not with apostles. Like they don't really do that. They can be surfacey, but they're not. But when it comes down to building their churches and like and helping people in the church, there's nothing surfacey about it. It's in depth, it's in detail, because they have to figure out their intrinsic desires to help you figure out where you're going to be planted. And that's the thing, is like in the midst of this, there's a fight there that's always happening. Evangelists are out there with these people, apostles are out there with these people, and apostles have that, like I said, that ride or die thing where they can't help it. They're going to pick up their sword and they're going to fight every battle that's put in front of them. It's not because they want to. They don't want to. They just can't help themselves. It's this innate thing in their hearts and minds that cannot stop. Even if they want to, they can't. And if they do manage to say no, it tears them up inside. Like they just sit there and lament over it. I personally know this feeling all too well. Where I'll go back when I find situations where I did not like try to help in some way, it kills me. It just like claws at me. There have been plenty of times where, God's even stopped me and been like, hey, you need to, where I'm like, I see a problem there, I want to fix it. And God's like, no, you need to hang back and you need to focus on what's on your plate right now. But I could help. I will still, to this day, some of those are years old, and I will to this day still remember them at times and be frustrated and wonder if I made the right decision by stepping back. It's just part of life, part of that office. And that's that thing, is like that's how deep that drive goes, to want to protect, to want to save. Like I said, in both cases, it's intrinsic, it's natural. And as a result, they need the support of the body. This isn't the kind of thing where it's like, okay, well, you guys need to just relax. They can't relax. It's what they're built to be like. It's like trying to tell a dog to, to switch off their hunt instinct whenever a car drives by. They really have a hard time with that. They can be taught to, but it might not always be what's best in this case. It is for the dog. It's an instinctive thing. And while it might need to be reined in, they might need support in knowing when to fight the battles and when not to fight the battles, when to go save the day and when not to save the day. They also need the support of, being able to know that, number one, it's okay that you don't win every battle. That's one of the biggest things, because that's one of the hardest things. That innate drive to save the day can be a double-edged sword just as much as anything. And I'm talking for both apostles and evangelists, because when we feel like failures is when we fail to protect, when we fail to save the day. And that's not saying that we actually failed in any way, shape, or form. We could have delivered the most beautifully spoken speeches and debated in the most capable ways, but people still have a choice to make. And if they choose destruction, that's really hard to watch and to know that we couldn't. It's like when you go and try to talk to that woman who is in that abusive relationship. And this is real. This is one that I had happen when I was much younger. There was a friend of mine, and he was abusing his girlfriend. And she sent me a text and messaged me about it. And I messaged her back and forth every day for a couple of weeks, trying to get her to leave him. Because it was just I told her, I was like, this is not, you need to not be here. You need to stop this. The only way that you can stop that is if you leave. But it's scary. Yeah, I know it's scary, but you need to. It's going to be worse for you to stay than it is for you to leave. And I know that that's terrifying to think about the unknown, but what's present is worse, I promise you. After a couple of weeks, she chose to stay with him. That killed me. That was really hard. Like I said, this was from 2008. Like I said, this stuff comes back to mind all the time. And as a result, she stayed with him, and eventually she cheated on him, and that was her out. And it was really destructive for both of them. But it was 3 years later or something like that. She messaged me to tell me she'd gotten out, and I was just I'm kind of happy for you, I guess. This could have been done a better way. At the end of the day, apostles and evangelists, they need that support to know that it's okay to lose. And that's when they need people so much. They need the other offices, they need other people. It doesn't really matter who, just as long as somebody can step up and say, dudette, whatever. It's okay. You didn't win this one, it's okay. So they need that support. They also just need the respite, to have people come around them and help recharge them after all that fighting, after all those battles. People can support them and help them not fall into patterns of bitter thought. Because, both are prone to doing this, apostles more than evangelists, I think, where, they get so tired of the fighting. They can't stop, but it's still painful, it's still hard, it's still frustrating. All the complications attached to it are still right there. And as a result, they really struggle with all of that. And it becomes this kind of constant moral tension that they're kind of going through. And they really need people to be able to stand up around them and help elevate them and keep them on the side of, remembering why it's important. And I don't mean like, telling them, hey, you're important, just help them see the bright side. And also to help them see when, that fight really isn't worth it. And help them be able to be okay, help them be able to make the adjustment of saying, okay, I need to give up this battle. Because this is not my battle. Sometimes, I've talked to, during the Office series, we talked about how apostles pretty much, they don't really come to life and function until they've had an experience with God. Like, you'll still find them doing their things. We talked about that during the Office series. Apostles without God and what they look like. Just like we talked about evangelists in the same boat. But, when it comes down to their function, a lot of apostles are less inclined to be seen. Whereas evangelists, with or without God, they're still going to be doing their thing. Like, you can have some dude in a church who's an evangelist and they have no idea, like they have no personal relationship with God, but they're still out there, like, in their nice suit with a bullhorn, trying to get people to come to Jesus. They don't wait for the Spirit. Whereas your apostles are generally not going to be doing that. They're going to just be at the church, and they're not really going to know quite what to do with themselves or why they're there, while they quietly, do other things on the side that illustrate their office. But the point is that in both of those cases, moving with the Spirit, or moving when they become entwined with God, as it were, and start moving with the Spirit, there's a lot that can be very powerful in that regard. But without Him, they can get run down very easily, and sometimes they're going to need help. And because where apostles can get really caught up in the desire to save the day, and evangelists can get very caught up in the desire to save the day, but they might not be able to hear from God. They need that support of, your prophets, for example, who are going to be able to give them direction and show up and be like, don't go there. Look, this is what God's telling me. Don't go there. And then be able to sit with them afterwards and not be a jerk about it when they don't listen, and then everything blows up in their face. And then they have to sit there and eat the crow of saying, yeah, you were right. They do need that direction at times. We've talked about how apostles and evangelists are the most prone to just going out and doing it on their own. Especially evangelists, they have the hardest time with community. Apostles will pick up and create their own church. Whether intentional or not, they will create a community. It's in their nature. Whereas evangelists will create a cult of personality, which is, in essence, they'll create a circumstance around them where people are coming and going based on that person. And they'll cycle through a lot of people in that process. Whereas apostles, you don't find that so much. There is some cycling, but that really has more to do with just the intricacies of community. It's not people getting frustrated with the one evangelist, But in those cases, what they do need is that despite their propensity to go out on their own, They need to know that they can have a home and be comfortable there. And more than that, to be supported at that place. And know that they have a place where they're going to be heard and understood, and they're going to be appreciated. That's what helps prevent them from running out on their own. Like, you guys need to come to, at any point in time when there's a church or community, we need to come to terms with the fact that, okay, if there's an apostle or an evangelist, they're going to go do the save the day thing. It's part of their nature. And they need help with it. They need help learning how to function in it and not be doing too much, not be overrunning themselves with, the difficulties of it. But they're gonna do it. So help them. So help them do that. Help them hone it in. Help them hone this particular thing that God has given them. And like a quick little blurb with that is like shepherds too. The most prone to doing this, aside from those two offices, are the shepherds. A lot of shepherds take after evangelists or, learn to do this thing where they'll start like collecting people. And it's similar in a way to what you see with apostles, in that they're going to collect them and make them part of their community, but it's less like a community and more like pets in a way. And that seems kind of bad, but it's not. They basically, what they do is, if they do this, which it isn't across the board, that's why it's at the end of the message here, as opposed to being like an intricate part of it. But for the shepherds that do this, what they're inclined to do is they'll see the need and the damage, or they see people that are hurt, especially, and they'll go out and collect them. It's like collecting stray animals, and they'll take care of them and try to nurse them back to health, and then keep them and continue to take care of them. It's a very different heart in that they're wanting to try to like help them heal. And that's their primary objective. And at times they'll do that at whatever cost, which can be really dangerous. Because they don't tend to be as confrontational as the other two. So like if their boundaries start being impeded, a lot of times with evangelists, if their boundaries start to be impeded, they'll fight you. Or they'll either drop you or they'll fight you. If it's an apostle and their boundaries start to be impeded, they'll fight you. Generally how it works. A lot of shepherds, when their boundaries are being impeded, they're just going to let them be impeded, and they're going to feel really bad about it. And they're not going to like it, and they're going to hate it, and then they're just going to sit in this place of like continuing bitterness and so on. Anyway, the point is that it's not a bad thing that they do this or anything, but they need support in that too, helping them maintain their boundaries in that place of, taking care of these broken, damaged people. Because their desire to take care of the people, to take care of the hurt, and see the wounds healed and see growth come to these people, tends to be louder than their desire than their own self-preservation mechanisms. So it's in that place for the community. And you could say that that's brokenness or things like that, but in reality it's a matter of priorities. And it's pretty general that shepherds do not prioritize themselves over others, and that's a place for them to grow and learn to be better about it, to find that balance. But it's not necessarily brokenness. It's usually very much so like a thought out thing. So, with that, yeah. To kind of summarize a little bit here, because there was a lot of stuff. When we talk about this house and the way that it's being built, we need to recognize that, sometimes there are going to be fights, there are going to be things that are going to be messy. And that's mainly in terms of just the outside of that house. The weeds are going to grow, the pests are going to come in. Sometimes there are going to be animals that pop in and you're going to go out and take them in as pets. And the reality is that for us as a church, we have to understand that there are some of us inside the community of the church who are built for that. And they're going to do it. And it's not something to be condemned, it's not something to be spited. It can be frustrating, it can be irritating, but more than anything, it's very important. See, if we don't have those evangelists out there, like, gathering the people, the church isn't growing. If we don't have the apostles out there, like, fighting those fights, saving those people, protecting that flock, doing what they can to help people integrate in, the church isn't going to function. Like, it's just going to be a hodgepodge mess of different people doing different things. And that's how a lot of churches are. So this is an important quality, and more than that, the world needs saving. There are so many people out there who are so completely lost, and they need something to hang on to. And to be fair to members of our little church here who don't believe in God, I'll put it this way: whether it's God or community, we're all here for a reason. We all stay here for a reason and keep coming for a reason, because there's something inside of us that's being fulfilled. And we need that fulfilled. And there are lots of other people around us who are in that same boat. You never know. So it's very important for us to lift up the people who are intrinsically built to do that, to bring those people in. And more than that, not just lift them up, but help them stay up and moving and functioning. And it's also important for those people to recognize who they are and that this is who you are. Do the thing that you're made to do. Be honored for that, celebrated for that, but also be supported in that. And, be willing to listen when the rest of the people in the group say, dude, you are way overdoing it today. You didn't need to pick up those 8 other fights. Dude, you've got like 3 people that you're talking to right now, and they're pretty well draining you. Why'd you pick up another person? Calm down. Deal with what's on your plate right now. There's a place for us all to grow together in this. Just like any of the other things that I'm going to end up talking about here, it's important. And it's just part of the community and the development of it. And that's what I got.